Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go. First story. Me lady hates everyone, especially us. We bought her house after she failed to pay her debt. The house we live in was built at the same time as hers. My parents were often at the construction site and helped if they could. The strange lady was nice to us at the beginning, but that changed soon. This happened around Christmas 2017. We have a neighbor who is very unpopular in our neighborhood. She is well known for harassing people who use a public pass at the left side of her house. The pass is 1 out of 3 to reach the public playground behind her house. If someone uses a pass, she would scream at them that this is her pass on her private property, which is wrong. Sometimes she would close the pass with a red and white plastic chain and won't let anyone use that pass. She would scream at kids on the playground when they were loud. That was in the daytime. She always has her shutters almost down so she can stalk the people on the street and stay unseen. If some kid's ball landed in her garden, she would bring it to the kids and destroy it with a knife right in front of them. All kids knew this and would run by her house if they wanted to go on the playground. When the neighbor kids were playing in the winter outside in the snow, she would call the CPS equivalent in my country and tell them they were locked outside by their parents as a punishment. If someone walked by her house at night, she would often call the police due to a noise complaint. She was known by everyone in our neighborhood as a witch, but she hated my family in particular. We lived right beside her house and our houses shared one wall. When me and my sister were young and we would use a swing in our garden or jump on our trampoline, she would regularly file noise complaints and often harass me and my sister when we were alone in our garden. If my parents heard her screaming swear words at us from the first floor of her house, they would yell back. If me or my sister walked on the path by her house, she would scream at us. We used the path daily on our way to school. One time when I came home from school, she was in her car with the trunk on the sidewalk. When I walked by the back of her car, she howled the engine and the dark exhaust hit me. Almost every night she would hit the shared wall with something to wake us up. Sometimes she rings on our door and tries to make us go to other neighbors to complain about small things. We often had lawsuits with her, one time because her trees grew 2 meters over the board. Another time because she built a fence by sticking bamboo mats in the dirt and tearing it down the next day and telling the police we destroyed her wooden fence. We won all lawsuits against her because my uncle, he's teaching law school, gave us good advice on how to deal with her and named lawyers he knew were good. She never paid the workers who repaired things at her house and the electrical and water bills. When her old car broke down, she didn't pay the car mechanic and never got her car back. She was in debt and had a mortgage on her house. When the foreclosure came, we were at the court and bought her house. She was with us in the courtroom where the auction was and tried to buy her own house, but wasn't allowed because she couldn't provide proof that she has enough money. We bought her house where she lived for 20 plus years in front of her. We bought it because my parents were at the construction of her house and knew the workers did a great job at building it. We renovated it when she left. We repainted all the rooms, renewed the insulation and put everywhere where no tiles were on the new wooden floor. My grandparents will be moving into her old house this fall. Next story. You won't give me my car back? The car that's in my name and I pay for? Fine. I'll take it back the hard but very fun way. Backstory before I met my now husband. He was married and divorced. We will call my husband H and his ex-wife D. Theirs was not a marriage of love, but a marriage of financial benefit. He was 19 and she was a little older. He was in college, but she couldn't afford to go. He was able to get grants and some small loans to afford college because his parents were dead broke. Her estranged father made too much money to qualify. So they got married. So the powers that be no longer considered her parents' income into her ability to pay part of the application for grants. He worked in commercial real estate and went to school part-time. With his income imposed her grants and loans, she was able to go to school full-time. And they graduated at the same time. They stayed together through and a little bit after college. Although they did not really love each other, they did like each other. He started making a decent living and learned to appreciate the finer things in life. His upwardly mobile career allowed them to buy and sell their first house, and then buy a second, nicer home. He also leased them both brand new cars. In the year 2000, my husband started to feel like their time together had passed its prime, and she agreed. They started the divorce process. And since her job did not pay that much, ETA they sold the house for a loss during the divorce process, so nobody got that. He decided to give her the following. 1. All the furnishings in their home, paid for by him. 2. Agreement to finish out the remaining months on her very nice SUV lease, in his name and $500 plus per month. ETA, which if included the divorce decree, and not as a separate agreement attached and referenced in the decree, is considered alimony in our state, regardless if it's called by the name alimony in the decree or not, and as such can be altered if the supported spouse remarries or either party has a significant change in income. In this case, she remarried. Her marital income more than tripled, and H's income was $0 for an at the time unknown period of time. 3. Half of his not inconsequential savings and retirement accounts, 100% funded by him. She always spent any money she had left after bills on shoes and clothes, never opened or contributed to a savings account. He was very generous, considering our state would not have required he pay any alimony and only a split of commingled assets, and he had come into the marriage with a small sum of savings he never commingled that he could have kept. They used a divorce-in-a-box type place that does not contested divorces on the cheap. They were amicably divorced 90 days later, and post-dated their future spouses within a few months of that. My husband and I started dating in early 2001. 2 or 3 months after the divorce was final. A year and a half after the divorce, I moved in with my husband, and she married her extremely well-off financial boyfriend. Her screw up a few months later. My husband really wanted to make an upward job change, different position in the same industry, which would significantly lower his income for a short time. $0 for at least 4 months, and then a slow but gradual increase, resulting in significantly more income after about at least a year of ramp-up. My income could just barely cover all our bills, my soon-to-be car payment, my car was on its last legs, and I desperately needed a new car, and his car payment. But I didn't have enough to cover his ex-wife's $500 per month car payment. He decided that since D was remarried, he should not have to continue paying for it and should be able to take her car back. And I could drive that instead of buying a new one myself. He thought it was fair, and he read his divorce decree and felt it was possible. We consulted with a lawyer who agreed that asking for it back was fair, and although it wasn't written into the divorce decree as alimony, it will likely be treated as such if they ended up going to court. So he had a good chance of winning. He called Dee to explain the situation and he asked her for the SUV back, but she said no and ended the conversation. He called her a week later and asked again, stating that if she still refuses, he will take her to court. She said she had spoken to her husband and they weren't going to give the car back. As an alternative, H asked if they could take over pay in all or at least some of the car payment, as a $500 plus per month would negatively impact his career advancement. They said they spoke to a lawyer and refused to pay a penny of the payment. On to the next option, court. Our lawyer had laid down a plan for doing it without representation, so he went to the courthouse the next day and filed his complaint. A few days later, Dee called, and she said she'd been summoned by the court, and she and her husband wanted to come over and see if they could work something out without going to court. Great! We figured she had seen that these $500+ car payments were basically alimony, and she really can't have her ex-husband paying for her car now that she's remarried. She's seen the light. The night she and her husband came over, their solution was not to give the car back. No, their solution was he return in the $500+ per month vehicle, pay the early lease termination penalty, and get her a new 36-month lease on a different cheaper car, say a $250 one. Considering there were around 18 months left on the $500 plus months, that would actually cost him more money in the long run with a penalty. And of course, that was a big no. ETA husband just reminded me we made a third attempt at a compromise. We asked that they take over the payment until the time at which his income returned to the pre-divorce level, by agreeing to share his pay stubs on a monthly basis to verify he was still below thresh. Once he was back to earning what was at the end of the marriage, he would take over the payments again. She said, well, I talked to a lawyer and he doesn't think you have a snowball's chance in hell of winning in court. Okay then, have a good night. Goodbye. And now they went feeling like they won. The revenge. The court date came and Ed shows up in court. D, nowhere to be seen. His case gets called and still no D. The judge reads the complaints, listens to the husband's story, and he makes his judgment. Paraphrasing, I don't think my ruling would be any different had she showed up to the court, but we will never know. I hereby declare a default judgment in favor of the plaintiff. Once my husband received a printed copy of the judgment, he hatched his plan. He called Dee, told her he won the case, and asked her for the keys. She said no and hung up on him. He went to the dealership to order 2 new keys. He had the VIN and the car was in his, so no problem there. He knew where she worked and her schedule. He ordered a tow truck and requested the sheriff's officer at 3:45 for the next afternoon at her work. The next day at 3:45, 15 minutes before she would finish, he met up with the tow truck driver and the officer in the parking lot of her work. The officer verified the documents and they located and loaded the truck onto the flatbed. They moved the truck to the curb right outside the doors to Dee's work. A little after 4, Dee walks out, sees the trio and her car on the truck, and she freezes in her tracks. This is the paraphrased conversation that followed. He tells him, "But you can't do that!" and he hands her the judgment. The officer reiterates the court's judgment. "But I talked to Joe. He said you didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning." Those were Joe's exact words. Snowballs. Snowball's chance in hell. Husband thinks for a second to try to figure out who Joe was. She had said it like he knew who Joe was. He tried to figure out a lawyer they both knew named Joe, but he could only think of their mortgage broker Joe. Joe? Like our mortgage broker Joe? Your lawyer is a mortgage broker? Yeah, he said that it wasn't written into the divorce decree as alimony. So you couldn't take it just because I got married. Well, the judge may or may not have agreed with you and Joe, but since you never showed up to court, you lost your opportunity to find out. And she was left mouth open, catching flies. He shook the officer's hand, thanked him for his time, and said to the truck driver, "I will meet you back at my house," said goodbye to Dee, and walked away. Just when husband neared his car, She screamed, "How am I supposed to get home now?" And he replied, "Call that idiot of a man you call a husband." That was okay with his wife's ex-husband supporting her. They got back to our house, unloaded the tow truck, and the driver was laughing hard. When he was finished, he said, "That was the best thing I've ever been a part of on this job." He ended up discounting the price by a bit, saying that's to make it up to you for having to be married to that entitled woman. I sold my SUV within a week and I took over the payments for his ex's car. Their divorce was no longer amicable. We got married, had a kid, and lived happily ever after. Moral of the story: pay for your own stuff and don't no-show if you've been summoned to court, even if you think the plaintiff doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning. Especially if the plaintiff doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning. Edit. I'm getting a lot of comments about my husband breaking a contract he made with her to make the payments. So I just wanted to explain the difference between a divorce decree and a contract. A divorce decree is not a contract. Contracts/agreements will be created and agreed to outside of the divorce decree, then incorporated as an exhibit. A settlement agreement is incorporated into divorce decree, usually by reference to it in the decree. The decree will generally state that the agreement is attached as an exhibit, or it will merely reference that the parties have reached an agreement that has been filed with and approved by the court. This situation was not a separate contract incorporated as an exhibit. This was a part of the divorce decree. And divorce decrees can be and frequently are altered if and when the marital or financial status of either party changes significantly. Additionally, the decree stated in multiple places that changes in marital or financial status of either party is just cause to request a review by the court, with the potential of altering the decree. So basically, you can't rely or make major life decisions based on the expectation of receiving alimony. If your ex loses his job, you can legally lose your alimony. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.